Curse of the Mire, A Truth Seeker's Story by Johnny Pearce and Andy Loneragan. Dedication. To searchers everywhere, you can find it, and you can do it. Prologue. The Guard. The jungle night was silent. Well, as silent as the jungles of Guatemala ever got, thought Carlos as he trudged round the empty camp. The buzz of cicadas and the almost inaudible squeak of bats hunting the large cricket-like creatures were now so commonplace to him that Carlos barely even heard them. This was his fourth night out here on his own. Now that the ground crew had left, having cleared a substantial area of the jungle ready for the scientists, archaeologists, and who knows who else to arrive, he was alone. Carlos didn't mind spending time on his own, normally. He had been an independent security guard for many years. Guatemala was not the safest of places for foreigners. Many of his jobs were along similar lines, keeping people or, in this case places, safe before the main event began. Whatever that might be. A vague job description for sure, but Carlos liked it that way. He liked not knowing what the next job may entail. Normally. This job was different. The beam of Carlos's torch cut through the darkness of the humid night air, revealing the sight around him. Tents, boxes of equipment, and caches of food that he'd been forbidden to touch. Sights that were very familiar to him. He turned to his right. The blade of light faltered as he turned, failing to illuminate the imposing, roughly hewn stone steps of the recently discovered temple that towered above him. He knew it was because of the distance between himself and the monument, but Carlos couldn't help but think the temple wanted to remain in the darkness and was somehow overpowering his attempts to see it more clearly. Estás loco, he thought. Just craziness. But the thought would not leave him. On his previous nights, Carlos had stayed in the camp, but tonight he would not allow silly fears about ancient temples to defeat him. He took a number of strides towards the crumbling stonework. His determination evaporating as the light of the torch rested on a set of glyphs, clearly depicting an ancient human sacrifice. Well, perhaps tomorrow, he thought to himself. Just as he turned to walk back to the pile of Hessian sacks he had formed into a sort of chair, a light flickered at the top of the temple stairs. Impossible. There was nobody else out here. If there was, he would have heard them coming from miles away, as the only way in and out was by helicopter or four-wheel drive jeep. There it was again, definitely. A light. An uninvited, unannounced visitor to the camp, to the temple? Carlos knew he had no choice but to investigate. After all, that was why he was here. With one hand on the butt of his pistol, he headed up the rocky steps. The entrance to the temple met him at the top. It was not particularly grand, simply a large rectangular hole in the otherwise unbroken walls of the square room set at the summit of the stone pyramid. Carlos tried to pierce the deep black of the ancient building with his torch, but, once again, the darkness seemed to be impenetrable, and yet, from somewhere within, the light flashed again, this time red. Without thinking, Carlos stepped into the dark, almost expecting it to weigh down around him, to surround him, to consume him. But nothing of the sort happened, and he let out a long breath. He hadn't even realized he had been holding his breath. To his left, the light pulsed again. Carlos felt for the video capture device attached to his large cargo waistcoat pocket and fumbled about, finally switching it on. He couldn't be too careful. Hola! He called into the tunnel-like corridor that ran downwards from the entrance chamber. Nothing. Not even an echo. The light pulsed again, and Carlos felt a strange pull. He longed to turn and run, but the red light burned once more, and he felt his feet begin to shuffle down the cramped passageway. Black, then red. Black, then red. All other details forgotten, Carlos was drawn forward by the mesmerizing throb. Around how many corners, down how many passageways he went, he did not know, but the light grew stronger. Stronger. Finally, he emerged into a vaulted chamber deep in the heart of the temple. Just as he was about to curse his curiosity, his impetuousness, the red light burst into existence once again. Though this time he could see what he thought was its source. There, in the middle of the room, was a podium, on top of which was an object unlike anything he had ever seen. He knew it was ancient, hundreds, thousands of years old. A shiver ran down his spine. Was he the first to see this for over a millennium? How was it creating that light? Why? Why now, after all these years? He took a step towards the podium. Black. He took another. Red. Black. Red. Black. The light became too powerful, the changes too rapid. He shut his eyes tightly, but there was no escape. Sudden pain, like a spear, shot through the centre of his forehead. He covered his eyes with his hands, but the strobing light searched for and found every crack. He felt a trickle of blood on his upper lip and traced it to his nostrils. Something was wrong, very wrong indeed. Something gave way in Carlos's brain, incapable of making sense of the barrage of light. His hand, smeared with his own blood, stretched forward to the podium, to the strange object that sat atop. Centimetres, millimetres from the artifact, Carlos slumped backwards. Red. Black. Red. Black. Red.